So this is book 4 of the Psalms. It begins with Psalm 90, from everlasting to everlasting. A prayer of Moses, the man of God. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations, before the mountains were brought forth. Wherever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You return man to dust, and say, Return, O children of man, for 1,000 years in your sight are but as a yesterday, when it is past, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. For we are brought to an end by our anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. For all our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger, and your wrath according to the fear of you? So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and for as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Okay, so quite the psalm to begin book 4 of the Psalms. This may be one of the most in-depth psalms that I've read thus far. So let's unpack it. So the title, From Everlasting to Everlasting. From an end to an end, in the most absolute of senses. And yet when I say from an end to an end, the end is the everlasting. And so in a sense there is no end. It's this infinite stretch of point to point to point to point. And within this model, one might say, why say everlasting to everlasting? Is everlasting not enough? And to that I would say, certainly in the human context, we feel as though we begin somewhere. We feel as though we end somewhere. But if the reality is truly from everlasting to everlasting, whatever that might mean, even if it does mean that given the material circumstance of humanity and their finite lifespan, this everlasting to everlasting is something that is greater than the selfish conception of the finite human existence. Because I think we have a tendency to want to elevate the human being above his current state of understanding. It's a betrayal of humility. And so I think when we see this everlasting to everlasting, it is a prompt, a guide to show us towards that virtue of humility. And so it begins, Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Now, a dwelling place is a place that one feels secure. They feel comforted. They feel at home. They feel grounded. They feel at peace. And so to open this psalm and say that this source, this home of humanity, this has been in the Lord in all generations. It's quite the statement, and it produces quite a state of mind. Certainly a dilation of the pupils, and an orientation, a direction, a stimulation of the attention towards what might come next. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. So before the mountains were brought forth, this could mean a few different things. But, as with many things, there is something that unites them at the top. And so within my foolish interpretation, I will attempt to draw out the low-hanging fruit, and then try to unite them at the top. So these mountains, we can conceptualize the mountains materially, in the sense of the form of their literal formation. Before, in some sense, before time itself, before the symbol of stability and of strength on the earth that is home to the human being, the earth that seems to comprise the totality of our objective experience. Before our experience, before the earth was formed. Now it's interesting that there are two words here that if I didn't know any better I would gloss over, because they seem like synonyms. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world. Form the earth and the world, as if these are two separate categories. And I think they are two separate categories. And I think it means to imply the earth in the sense of the lower register of the the space that is waiting to be illuminated, and the world, which is the material framework for that light to flood in and for it to exist, nature, and all of its laws. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You return man to dust, and say, "Return, O children of man." So again, we have the understanding of the finite nature of man. Return to dust. Return to this more primitive state. And in so doing, recognize your own finality in this life and this existence. And within the recognition of this finality, make it your purpose to elevate the life that you are given. So that you may pass it on to future generations. And it may continue this process of the human march towards being in communion with God. For 1,000 years in your sight are but as a yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. So of course this means that it's a recognition of the infinite nature of God. 1,000 years to Him, 1,000 years to God is a fleeting thing. The very conception of time is different, because 1,000 years to man is a very big deal. It transcends the individual. It transcends the ego. It transcends the superficial and the worries at the present. And it brings us into a scope of view of the magnificence of the everlasting to everlasting, the infinite nature. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning, it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening, it fades and withers. And so what we see here is a pattern. We see a cycle. They are like a dream. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream, like a grass that is renewed in the morning. This ebb and flow, this cycle, this rebirth and death, life and death, this breathing in and breathing out. But what can humanity gain from such an existence? Perhaps that's not the right question. Immediately after I spoke it, I thought how arrogant of a statement that is. How lacking in humility that statement is. However, if I were to take a step back, I think I can recognize that this pattern will have some effect on the condition of man. But what effect would that be? Rather than asking, what can this do for us? Or how can we use it? Merely, what is the effect? Is this effect to prevent the human mind from becoming this tyrannical force in the universe? To prevent its unbridled pride, to preserve its humility as possible? To keep it in line, perhaps? Or more generously, to give it perspective. And within this perspective lies the possibility of the seed of value, of purpose, and of meaning. And it's given that we are thrown into this existence, this transitory existence, we almost find it within our nature, intuitively, to seek after the seeds that we know are planted within the earth. We seek to find them. We seek the seed of the tree to plant for ourselves. So that we may find a greater and greater purpose. And there are no shortage of false promises, false hopes, misplaced goods, sins, and terrible vices. But also, just as we are born into them, eventually they are laid to rest, and we are born again anew. I think this applies as much to the life cycle as a whole, the birth and dying, as it does within the finite life of man, the birth and death, the rebirth and death, the rebirth and death. And it's up to us, every time we die, in a sense, every time our makeup, our psychological makeup, is disturbed, is challenged to the point of paradigm shift, it's up to us to understand what is happening, grab onto the pattern, to ride the wave and say, okay, I am dying now. I am dying. My job now is not to prevent it, is to let it happen, to die gracefully, with honor, to let the sins of a previous day and the vices of a previous day, to recognize them and lay them to rest. And once we have done that, if we have done that thoroughly, we will be reborn into something completely different. And then in this example, this is within one lifetime. But this can transcend. It can map over a family, a town, a city, a nation, a people. For we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. And so it is this very thing, the ultimate judge, that we cannot run from. We may try and find to the utmost, with the utmost zeal within our finite existence, to find the darkest corner of reality and to hide in it, to delude ourselves into thinking that we can hide from the truth and from the light, because we are so afraid of its consequences and its pain. We are afraid to die. We are afraid to face it. Our secret sins in the light of your presence. For all our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? And this is a recognition of what I was just describing. He's saying we live this long life, if we're lucky, 70, 80 years. But we live it in this toil and this trouble. And then soon they're gone. We fly away. But what is the point? But who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? Because if we did so, if we knew what to submit to, the type of thing to truly be afraid of, and that is to feel the absence of love, to not have purpose and to not have meaning, to feel that our span, our lifespan, is but toil and trouble. And we do this, we feel this way not because we fear God, but because we fear the self. We fear not satisfying the ego. We fear the emptiness. Now, these are two different things. One can be conflated for the other. One can be deluded into thinking that the satisfaction of the ego is the fulfillment of meaning and purpose. It can lead one to a false sense of virtue. But of course, the truth is, the ego must suffer. It must understand what needs to be surrendered up, so that the rest of the body, the rest of the whole, can truly live in peace, can truly live and be, can truly understand their place in this reality, in this existence. And to not be a slave to their own desires. But to be an independent agent that stands up tall, that looks for the source of it all, and chooses to accept it. Chooses to accept and walk in that path and in that light. So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom, Return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. And so when he says, teach us to number our days, it means, I think, teach us to understand that life has value, and it matters what we do with our days. And if we are to recognize that our days are finite, and we keep track of what we have done in this life, we may gather the sufficient evidence for a way of life that is closer to the divine source. We will learn from our mistakes. So teach us to number our days that we may get to the heart of wisdom. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and for as many years as we have seen evil. So in other words, let us learn from our mistakes and our experiences. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Now, what does it mean to establish something? It's to make it known. It's to make it concrete. To bring something into being. To provide structure to something. To house a certain value, a certain meaning, purpose, whatever. And for this work of our hands to be established, it means it's established in this steadfast love. It's secured upon the foundations of righteousness and justice. Psalm 91, my refuge and my fortress. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and buckler. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only look with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. Because you have made the Lord your dwelling place, the Most High, who is my refuge, no evil shall be allowed to befall you, no plague come near your tent. For he will command his angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways. On their hand they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the adder, the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. Because he holds fast to me in love, I will deliver him. I will protect him because he knows my name. When he calls to me, I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and honor him. With long life, I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. So he who makes his home out of the morals, the values, the ethical structure of the Most High will also dwell in the shadow of the Almighty. Of course, they will not be the Almighty, but they will dwell in that shadow. The divine presence will be cast over them. They will succeed in life. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Because I have faith. I have faith in the Most High. I have faith that there is a conception as the Most High. That there is something above my current existence that continually humbles me. Always another ladder for me to step up upon. For if I delude myself into thinking that I've achieved the end goal, then I have moved away from God. For my duty in this life, in this temporary life, is to climb the staircase, and not to judge those who lie beneath me, but to give a voice to those who lie beneath me, to show them the way and the path that I have walked towards righteousness, towards the Most High. And they will listen because my fortress and my refuge is within God. So I think there is some updating to do in terms of the analogies of the ancient world. They may not entirely apply to us now in the modern day, but we can understand the pattern, we can understand the thread of thought. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler. Now, of course, in this example, we are the bird, we are the fowl that falls for the snare of the trapper. To be delivered from this means that we will not fall into the hands of the wicked. We will not succumb to deadly pestilence. We will know better. We will be paying attention. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a buckler. And a buckler is just another word for a portable shield. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day. And so what this means is you will not fear the darkness. You will not fear the uncertainty. You will not fear the unknown. But also, when there is light to see, when there is knowing and understanding to be had, the dangers that exist within that space, that have the potential to wound, or to distract, or to blind, or to physically maim, you will not fear these things. For even if they do come, you will know where your heart lay. You know where your security rests. Nor the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. And so this is a psalm of faith. And of course, given the context of all that we have learned, the slow march of the Psalms, the slow influx of what exactly it is that we have faith in. Again, the analogy of the darkened room in which man is thrown into his existence. He knows nothing, he sees nothing, but he feels around this environment. He comes upon a structure, many different objects that seem to be piled upon other objects that form a sort of a foundation and a base for a much larger structure that is the divine spirit. This is the true faithful institution of man that conceives and that thirsts for, that runs after this divine spirit, that attempts to communicate with it. And in so doing, we gain an understanding. Because how are we to understand what this divinity, what this God is, if we do not commit ourselves to it, commit ourselves to the study of it? And the words that we have heard over and over again are first and foremost faithfulness to these things, because these are the things that anchor us to reality. We have virtue, we have righteousness, we have uprightness, we have love. We have humility. We have the recognition of our own mortality. We have the gift, again, the understanding that the human mind can perceive of fundamental patterns. And we can use these fundamental patterns to interpret how to be virtuous, how to be just, how to be righteous. And through this mechanism of being, we come into harmony not only with one another and with nature, but also with the divine source of it, the very thing that allowed us to conceive of it. Psalm 92. How great are your works. A song for the Sabbath. It is good to give thanks to the Lord, to sing praises to your name, O Most High, to declare your steadfast love in the morning, and your faithfulness by night. To the music of the lute and the harp, to the melody of the lyre, for you, O Lord, have made me glad by your work. At the works of your hands I sing for joy. How great are your works, O Lord! Your thoughts are very deep. The stupid man cannot know, the fool cannot understand this, that though the wicked sprout like grass, and all the evildoers flourish, they are doomed to destruction forever. But you, O Lord, are on high forever. For behold your enemies, O Lord, for behold your enemies shall perish. All evildoers shall be scattered. but you have exalted my horn like that of the wild ox. You have poured over me fresh oil. My eyes have seen the downfall of my enemies. My ears have heard the doom of my evil assailants. The righteous flourish like the palm tree and grow like a cedar in Lebanon. They are planted in the house of the Lord. They flourish in the courts of our God. They still bear fruit in old age. They are never full of sap and green. To declare that the Lord is upright, He is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in Him. So what can be said of this psalm? On one hand, it is a reminder to pray. It is a reminder to sing praises, to give thanks. Verse 2, to declare your steadfast love in the morning and your faithfulness by night. And so what this means, I think, is quite profound, because we have an image here of the morning, the rising sun, the illumination of the surround. For otherwise this surround was plagued by utter darkness and the lack of understanding. But upon the morning and upon the rise of the sun, we find understanding. Things begin to make sense to us. We feel as though we are a part of something. We are grounded to something. And so to declare your steadfast love in the morning is to declare something that is so strong, a binding that is so strong, a way of being that is so strong. This love that can come from any number of directions, from the interactions between people, between family members, between lovers, between friends, between acquaintances, between two otherwise unknown human beings to one another. This phenomenon of love is pervasive everywhere. Now I can't pretend at this moment to unpack everything that love is. But to say that there is no truth in love, I think, is to say a falsity, because I think by its very nature, love stems from what is true. And I think the modern mind, may go directly towards truth in the material sense. But it's much larger of a term than that. And I think it reveals to us how much larger a term truth is than just reductionism, than just materialism. But having said that, again, to declare this thing, this steadfast love, this absolute truth, this harmony, again, that's pervasive. It infects us to the very soul. Not only does it agree with our reason, but it agrees with our body. It agrees with our ego, so that it does not pull us into inferior dimensions, into inferior goods. We are not plagued by the evils of possibility, but rather we are oriented towards the Most High in this state of steadfast love in the morning. And so when the nighttime comes, when all of this intelligibility seems to fade, when the exhaustion of the day takes hold, and the mind no longer finds the strength to be engaged with the external world. All it wants is rest. It wants a break from its conscious way, from its responsibility of reason, all of these processes of the mind, especially those of an elevated nature, those of finding scientific truths, metaphysical truths, philosophical truths, they're taxing to the mind, as exercise is taxing to the body. And at a certain point it requires rest. The nighttime comes. And no matter how faithful we are, or no matter how much we want to bathe in the steadfast love of the morning, I think we all understand that eventually the day comes to an end, and we must lay our head to rest. And this process of moving from a state of brightness and alertness, of readiness to accept the reason of others, the argumentation of others, all of this that is the richness of the alert and oriented conscious mind. Now, of course, the examples that I've provided may not be sufficient to properly hold the argument. I mean, there are plenty of sophisticated things that the mind can do when it is at its best, when it's awake and it's alert and it's ready to go. In this state, it can feel love most acutely. It can be receptive to arguments most truthfully, because it has the energy to expend. And so when the nighttime comes, again, this image of darkness, the sun has begun to set. And when it does set, the darkness is around us. We will have faith. Not because we do not know that it is not because that we do not know that the light does not exist. We have faith because we know that the day will return, the morning will return, the sun will rise again. The intelligibility will flood our minds again. And so this doubt and this anxiety that comes from the periods, which of course is symbolized here by the morning and the night. Again, the anxiety, the fear, the insecurities that come from the nighttime, they need not plague us. Because we know when we have felt the morning light, and we know that it will return again. And so we have faith in it. And I should mention that when the sun rises again, when the morning is upon us, when the time of steadfast love is upon our shoulders, it's the responsibility of the faithful to maximize their engagement with it, so that they can become in greater harmony with it, so that they could reach higher academic standards, so that they could move closer in relation to their family members, so that they could be a better father, a better mother. They can create better family units. This is the state of the faithful. And it's a beautiful thing in this psalm that it says, we sing these praises. Again, everything, including the bit about the steadfast love in the morning and the faithfulness by night, we do this to the music of the lute and the harp, to the melody of the lyre. For you, O Lord, have made me glad by your work. At the works of your hands I sing for joy. And so when we think about this steadfast love in the morning, and we think about all the works that could be done by man under these circumstances, you think about all of the upstanding individuals within human history. Now, if we were to remove the human element, and just imagine for a moment all that is and all that is possible, without the limitations of the human mind, something that is more appropriate to the divine mind, how great are these works? Those thoughts must be very deep, and compared to man, they cannot compare. And even though, in the world of man, that wickedness seems to sprout up around him, evildoers seem to get their way all about him, it is not because God wants this to happen. God says, perhaps saying is not the right word, God gives the gift of free will so that we may exercise our morning however we see fit, and we may do with the night whatever it is that we may see fit. And so these evildoers, these lost individuals, the people that walk a path that is subpar beneath the divine direction, they will not last, because we know that there is truth in the morning. There is no faithfulness in the pervasive night that is without the morning. The intelligibility and the understanding of the conscious mind is a prerequisite to faith. And although the enemies, the evildoers, the wicked, may possess qualities that are necessary for understanding, ultimately, when we think at the grand picture, the grand scale, the grand hierarchy, they will not persist. They will die out. Like, I should say, many of the righteous, because we are merely human beings. But the righteous will live on, in the sense that their righteousness, the elevation and the brightness that they have shown into our conscious minds, into our intelligible reality, will not fade from the earth. We will continue to have faith in it. But those of the wicked that spread darkness and fear can only hope for power. That is the only thing that they can survive on, by controlling the conscious mind of others, so that they cannot appreciate this steadfast love in the morning, that the steadfast love of those who are controlled by another experiences is, in fact, a lower form of it, to maintain its control, only to let in enough light to be submissive, to barely be a human being. And that is it. Again, this is the context of the subjection of man to the wicked. But God has exalted my horn like that of a wild ox. You have poured over me fresh oil. My eyes have seen the downfall of my enemies. My ears have heard the doom of my evil assailants. And so here we have an understanding of the experience of this, the observation of it. Not necessarily the pure philosophical wandering of it. We have the grounding in reality. What specifically is it? It doesn't say. And as anecdotal as it may be, it's a pattern nonetheless. And then the remainder of these verses, 12 through 15, are a recognition of the proliferation and the flourishing of the righteous. They still bear fruit in old age. They are ever full of sap and green. They declare that the Lord is upright. He is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in him. Psalm 93. The Lord reigns. The Lord reigns. He is robed in majesty. The Lord is robed. He has put on strength and his belt. Yes, the world is established. It shall never be moved. Your throne is established from of old. You are from everlasting. The floods have lifted up, O Lord. The floods have lifted up their voice. The floods lift up their roaring, mightier than the thunders of many waters, mightier than the waves of the sea. The Lord on high is mighty. Your decrees are very trustworthy. Holiness benefits your house, O Lord, forevermore. And so a fairly straightforward psalm here. It's a recognition of the place of the divine in this map of the meaning hierarchy, I guess we can call it, the metaphysical landscape, even the philosophical landscape. And so we place God at the top of it all. He has put on strength as a belt. And what is strength? Often I think of strength in terms of physical power, that of the capacity of the muscle to generate force. And what does this mean? Of course, this is a material explanation without meaning. But if we are to take this analogy and to breathe into it life, what can we say of this muscle power, this force that's generated by the body? What significance does it have to us? I think it's significant because it is capable. It's robust. It can move things. Someone that is strong is capable of defending themselves. Someone that is strong is capable of standing tall in the face of adversity, not crumbling in the face of challenge, not succumbing to the anxiety and the fear of the unknown. But this strength is power. And so he wears it as this belt that is this encompassing thing. It covers the circumference of the body. And so it's a totalizing thing, this strength and this quality of God. Now, if we are to introduce again, like we have on many occasions, our example of the condition of man that's thrown into a darkened room, darkened in the sense that he cannot see, but he stumbles through it to find his purpose and to find his meaning, to find the why to his existence. He stumbles into many different objects. He comes upon a structure. Built upon it, he can tell. He can make out certain shapes. And he begins to form an understanding of his environment. He begins to understand what is in this room. And it's very difficult. We can often get the bits and pieces that surround the divine. And so we are left with this sort of place where the divine fills, sort of like a void that the divine fills. But here in this psalm, with the analogy of the strength as a belt, I think we have an illumination of the divine, of his nature, part of its nature, of course. For the belt surrounds the divine, or the belt of strength, I should say, surrounds God. And so this is something that should be stored in our conceptual library. And so the world is established. It shall never be moved. And I think we have to remember here that the Bible refers to the world and the earth as two different things. The world, I think, is more of an encompassing thing, whereas the earth primarily refers to the material, or more specifically, to the matter that has not received the gift of consciousness, or has not been influenced by a conscious mind, that has not been manipulated for some purpose or for some, and given some meaning, let's say. This would be the earth in the symbolic language of the Bible. And I think the world is more encompassing. The world includes man's existence upon the earth. And so when it says that the world is established, it shall never be moved, I think this in some sense is talking about the consciousness of man. It's not necessarily talking about the earth, but it is talking about creation, I think. It's a different way of seeing. It's not Copernican, but it's not wrong either, because it's placing meaning and purpose at the center of it all, the intelligibility at the center of it all, rather than what we know to be the material reality, where the earth is not the center of our solar system. It's the sun, and our earth revolves around the sun. This is nowhere near what this is talking about, both of which are true, in my opinion. But the world is established. It shall never be moved. And this moving, it can mean many number of different things. Certainly, I don't think that moving in terms of the literal sense of moving an object from point A to point B is what it means. That wouldn't make any sense. But it shall never be moved, meaning its condition in which it finds itself. The condition in which it is beneath a creative spirit, a creative power. It shall never be moved from that inception, even if there are many ends to be had. There are many cycles of human lives and of nations and of even earthly bodies, of galaxies, of suns that come into existence and come to an end. But what cannot be moved is the very thing that was set in motion, which is the creation. And we can say this and that and the other about the heat death of the universe. But there's too much to be known still there. And that's not to say that what we don't know is not known because of God, but rather what we don't know and what we claim to know is because of faith. And it is our responsibility to maintain faith in all situations. And if it is indeed the case that we find ourselves into a narrative, such as the heat death of the universe, that does not provide man with meaning, then I think we lose our faith. And so it's not a matter of God of the gaps. It's a matter of faith in what to believe in. And it doesn't necessarily even mean that the heat death of the universe is a false theory. It just means that the perspective must be changed. Your throne is established from of old. You are from everlasting. You are from all time. Time is irrelevant to the everlasting. And so this verse 3, we see language about the flood, and often the flood in the Bible is a symbol of change, of destruction, of the cyclical nature of nature. And of course it scales. There can be a flood in a relationship or a state of mind that changes it, destroys it, makes it into something different. There could be a flood in the form of government that comes in the form of a revolution. There could be a flood in the mind of man that prompts him to behave differently. Now, these destructive forces are unguided. They're a force of nature. Now, of course, the divine flood, the floods that are directed by God, are the necessary ones. The change and destruction that needs to happen for mankind. But floods in and of themselves are a pattern of nature. They may exist, I think, independent of God's hand. And we have to be careful not to let go of God's hand, because we could be swept up in these floods. We could be swept up in the very creation of God. And so what might it mean? The floods have lifted up. It almost seems like a counterintuitive, almost like an antagonism. If the flood has lifted up, if the flood has lifted up their voice, if the floods have lifted up their roaring, then this might refer to a divine flood, the type that is necessary, the type of change and destruction that is necessary for man to look and to perceive a bit differently. The weirdness that connects us all together, to rediscover love, we discover the point of our suffering and our striving. Your decrees are very trustworthy. Holiness benefits your house, O Lord, forevermore. Psalm 94. The Lord will not forsake his people. O Lord, God of vengeance, O God of vengeance, shine forth. Rise up, O Judge of the earth. Repay to the proud what they deserve. O Lord, how long shall the wicked exult? They pour out their arrogant words, all the evildoers boast. They crush your people, O Lord, and afflict your heritage. They kill the widow and the sojourner, and murder the fatherless. And they say, the Lord does not see, the God of Jacob does not perceive. Understand, O dullest of people, fools, when will you be wise? He who planted the ear, does he not hear? He who formed the eye, does he not see? He who disciplines the nations, does he not rebuke? He who teaches man knowledge, the Lord, knows the thoughts of man, that they are but a breath. Blessed is the man whom you disciple, O Lord, and whom you teach out of your law, to give him rest from days of trouble, until a pit is dug for the wicked. For the God will not forsake his people. He will not abandon his heritage. For justice will return to the righteous, and all the upright in heart will follow it. Who rises up for me against the wicked? Who stands up for me against evildoers? If the Lord has not been my help, my soul would soon have lived in the land of silence. When I thought, my foot slips, your steadfast love, O Lord, held me up. When the cares of my heart are many, your consolations cheer my soul. Can wicked rulers be allied with you? Those who frame injustice by statute. They band together against the life of the righteous, and condemn the innocent to death. But the Lord has become my stronghold, and my God, the rock of my refuge. I will bring back on them their iniquity, and wipe them out for the wickedness. The Lord our God will wipe them out. And so this is a psalm a pattern that I think we see often. It's a recognition of the prevalence of wickedness in their society, and the desire to come to terms and understand why it is that the wicked plague them so. And I think it's within this challenge, the challenge that the wicked poses to the righteous, or those that desire to be righteous. Within this challenge, I think we gain wisdom, because we are forced to find answers. Understand, O dullest of the peoples, fools, when will you be wise? He who planted the ear, does he not hear? He who has formed the eye, does he not see? He who disciples the nations, does he not rebuke? He who teaches man knowledge, the Lord, knows the thoughts of man, that they are but a breath. And so what can we make of this language? He who planted the ear, does he not hear? And I think this is an illumination and the argument for God's role and God's understanding And so we have this conception of he who planted the ear. This organ that within it contains the necessary apparatus for us to perceive sound and make it come together in some unifying manner for which it becomes meaningful to us. Of course, many things in our environment that we hear don't mean anything to us, but that has to do with salience. That has to do with attention. But those sounds that we choose to pay attention to, those sounds that come within the words of our loved ones, or from a passionate leader, or from a beautiful song, these things we hold. We give them a proper place in our mind. And so we say, he who planted the ear. That is the very idea of this ear and of this mechanism that leads into this unity. The seed that was planted within the earthly substrate, in the sense of the unmeaninged substrate, was now given a breath of life. For now we have this ear, this way of seeing, or I should say this way of hearing, right? This way of perceiving, better put, more broadly, or more unifying. And it's from the understanding that this grew from somewhere. The idea that this way of reaching the unity at all, this meaning and purpose that is behind the music and the words, this was at one time a seed, just as the seed of a tree was planted within the earth for it to grow. And so we humble ourselves and we say, he who planted this, does he not hear? That is, we may form all of the ideas that we may want in our minds about a particular speech or about a particular way in which our loved one communicates with us, or about a particular musical piece. But this is just as the flood that is not directed by the divine. It can go in any direction. We could be swept up in it. But the flood that is directed by the divine towards what is most unifying and most purposeful and most meaningful. This was the seed that was planted for us. Now, as human beings, we may design these traditions that attempt to figure out what exactly it is that was planted, the purest of seeds, the purest of intelligibility. And we fail. Often we fail. But we should not mistake the institutional failures for the very attempt of trying to understand it, because it is within the very attempt of trying to understand it that we take steps forward in life, that we find life and existence worthwhile. And so again, he who planted the ear, does he not hear? He who formed the eye, does he not see? He who disciplines the nations, does he not rebuke? He who teaches man knowledge, the Lord, knows the thoughts of man, that they are but a breath. Or in other words, they are temporary. And so this is the answer of the challenge that is posed by the wicked. No. And then to continue the line of thinking, once man understands the purity of the seed, the formation of the eye, the planting of the ear, these organs, again, of sense, of perception, that we utilize into a higher meaning. Blessed is the man whom you disciple, and whom you teach out of your law. Again, this law, this is a direction. This is a direction that points towards the most salient, what ought to be paid attention to. To give him rest from days of trouble, until a pit is dug for the wicked, for the Lord will not forsake his people. He will not abandon his heritage, for justice will return to the righteous, and all the upright in heart will follow it. Psalm 95. Let us sing songs of praise. O come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let us come into his presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a joyful noise to him with songs of praise. For the Lord is a great God, and a great King above all gods. In his hands are the depths of the earth. The heights of the mountains are his also. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, and the sheep of his hand. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts, as at Meribah, as on the day at Massah in the wilderness, when your fathers put me to the test, and put me to the proof, though they had just seen my work. For 40 years I loathed that generation and said, they are a people who go astray in their heart, and they have not known my ways. Therefore I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. And I'd like to make a point about this last verse here. It's a very important one. Therefore I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. Just as in a previous psalm that we talked about in this episode, Psalm, I believe it was 92, when we were talking about to declare your steadfast love in the morning and your faithfulness by night. And in Psalm 93, as we were talking about, the floods have lifted up, O Lord, the floods have lifted up their voice, the floods lift up their roaring. We have this differentiation that we established between the patterns of nature and the patterns that are inspired by the divine spirit. And so therefore, if we are to say rest, and imagine this night at which the human being undergoes this rest from the day, from the work of the day. We can rest any number of ways. We can rest in sin. We can rest in a box of donuts. We can rest in some garbage reality television show. We can rest in pornography. But since we do not know the ways of the Lord in these cases, we shall not enter his rest, the divine rest, this pure satisfaction that the donuts only give us a false conception of what that rest is, It's like placing a band-aid over a hemorrhaging wound. It needs much more care, much more subtle care, a greater understanding, and a care that is offered to us in a bed of understanding. We'll say it that way. And so if we shall walk in God's path, we shall enter into his rest. In his hands are the depths of the earth. The heights of the mountains are his also. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. And so we can imagine this in a material sense, but why bother with it? Because it means nothing to us. It means nothing if we do not interpret it correctly. So if it says, in his hands are the depths of the earth, it means even though this seemingly meaningless material reality, I'm talking about base nature, if we were to walk outside and place our foot upon a large rock or stone, and to consider its lifelessness, it's saying that even within this are the hands of God. The author of this novel, perhaps not directly intervening at that moment, for it would be strange if we were to read a novel and then all of a sudden, if we were to return to a passage or to continue reading, and it suddenly changes. We would imagine this to be a miracle. We would imagine this to be strange. While I do not deny the possibility of miracles, I'm saying that within most of our experiences, these miracles do not take place. They are as though we are reading from a novel that does not have the direct influence of the author as we are reading it, because it has already been designed, it has already been set into motion. We are just living its story, discovering its story. Again, the question of miracles is for a different time. Now here's the beautiful thing. When we move into verse 8, do not harden your hearts, as at Meribah, as on the day at Massah in the wilderness. This refers to a miracle. In a sense, it's more than just referring to a miracle. If we are to remind ourselves, Meribah and Massah are referred to in this context of the Israelites and their journey through the wilderness after their liberation from Egypt. And so we see it mentioned in Exodus 17:7 and Numbers 20:13. And we see the Israelites complaining about the lack of water, and they accuse God and Moses of leading them out of Egypt just to die of thirst. In response to this, a miracle occurs. The author seemingly rewrites a portion of the narrative as it's being lived. as it's being read. And water came out of the rock. And so, did it literally come out of the rock? I don't know. But something so miraculous as water coming from a rock surely did happen. Something that was unforeseen. Something that strengthened their faith. But unfortunately, in spite of the event, the miraculous event, the Israelites continued to question God's authority or his ability to provide for them. And so Moses struck the rock at Meribah instead of speaking to it as he was instructed by God. And as a result, Moses could not enter the promised land. His actions and his behavior were so counter to what needed to be done in that moment as a leader that his generation was not able to enter that promised land, to find that peace and that divine stability. And so we're going to end this here. We will continue next time with Psalm 96, Worship in the Splendor of Holiness.